Did you know we have completely ad-free early access to all of our episodes? Well, we do. Not only that, but we have dozens of bonus episodes waiting for you. Head on over to patreon.com/ghosttownpod, and you can check it out for 7 days absolutely free. That's patreon.com/ghosttownpod. A White House Haunting. I'm Jason Horton.
I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And this is Ghost Town.
Occult behavior can happen anywhere. Dark basements filled with candlelight, graveyards at midnight, and even the White House. Yes, the White House. Though 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is perhaps not the first place you'd think of lifting the veil between the living, the dead, and the spirit world, for years, first ladies, flotuses with their own agendas, have been convening with mysterious forces for power, answers, and knowledge. And who can blame them? A high-pressure political role requires support, however you can get it. So, today on Ghost Town, the known and not so well known first ladies of U.S. history who believed and dabbled in the occult. Though many first ladies believed in ghosts, according to Pat Kreider, the executive director of the National First Ladies Library, let's make a distinction between the belief in the supernatural and playing an active role in witchcraft and occult activities. As a note, Grace Coolidge, Eleanor Roosevelt, Lady Bird Johnson, and Jackie Kennedy all claimed to have seen Lincoln's ghost or felt his presence during their years in the White House. But again, not exactly what we're talking about here. No. Today we'll focus on 6 first ladies who took it much further than that, showing a fascination and participation in witchcraft-like activities for a means to their own ends. From March 4th, 1853 to March 4th, 1857, Jane Pierce, wife of Franklin Pierce, the 14th President of the United States, was the first well-known First Lady occultist and came to have the nickname, quote, the Shadow in the White House. This could be for a lot of reasons. One, that Jane hated politics, which continued throughout her husband's political ascent. It could also be because of the horrible deaths of her 3 sons, who all died in childhood. Franklin Jr. was born in 1836 and died 3 days after his birth. Frank Robert was born in 1839 and died at the age of 4 of epidemic typhus. Then there was Benjamin, who was born in 1841 and died in 1853 at age 11 in a tragic train accident. Weighed down with depression, extreme guilt, and anxiety, Pierce initially attempted to beckon her son's spirit by penning an emotional letter to him, asking him to return to her so she could repent. Here's a selection from that letter. Quote, God help me now to correct in bitterness my errors when, oh, it is too late for you to have the sweet benefit of it. And now this Sabbath evening you will come in fancy before me, and I sit close by to you, with your hand in mine perhaps, or you will lean against me on the sofa, or as sometimes you did on Sunday evening, sit on my lap a little while, Jane Pierce wrote. Though a devoutly religious woman, Pierce was determined to reconnect with her son, so she invited the Fox sisters, key figures in the modern spiritualism movement from upstate New York, into the White House to hold seances. Supposedly, the sessions provided Pierce some degree of peace, though friend of the family Nathaniel Hawthorne would write of Pierce that she, quote, wasn't really of this world. After the Pierces vacated the White House, lifelong bachelor James Buchanan moved in for 4 years, boring, but right after that we have, of course, Mary Todd Lincoln. Lincoln has herself quite a reputation for being extravagant, temperamental, and in the eyes of some, completely insane. But the reality, of course, is more complicated than that. Like Pierce, Lincoln lived through the deaths of her own sons, one before Abraham Lincoln's term, one during, and one after, and was a strong-willed, independent thinker, and she also, of course, loved herself a seance. From March 4th, 1861 to April 15th, 1865, Mary Todd Lincoln became the First Lady, conducting seances in the White House. In fact, Abraham Lincoln himself purportedly attended some of the seances that were held in the White House Red Room. In fact, according to historian Carl Anthony, Abraham Lincoln himself even purportedly attended a seance, which were held in the White House Red Room. Apparently, Mary Todd Lincoln reached both her dead sons, Willie and Eddie, whose ghosts she claimed would later visit her in her White House bedroom. Quote, "Willie comes to me every night and stands at the foot of my bed with the same sweet, adorable smile he's always had," Lincoln told her sister, according to the Lincolns' Portrait of a Marriage, and detailed in the Vice piece, quote, "The First Ladies Who Brought Witchcraft to the White House" by Amanda Arnold. He does not always come alone. Little Eddie is sometimes with him. After her husband's assassination, also according to Arnold, reports claimed she attended a, quote, "spiritualist commune," and several years after his death, asked the infamous spiritualist photographer William M. Mumler to take a couple's picture of her and her husband's ghost. Lincoln would later be institutionalized and attempt suicide, the memory of her children and husband still gnawing at her psyche. December 18th, 1915 to March 4th, 1921, Edith Wilson and her successor from March 4th, 1921 to August 2nd, 1923, Florence Harding, consulted with the famed Washington, D.C. astrologer Madame Marcia Champney in the 1910s and 1920s. Champney was a bit of a snake oil salesman doing for-profit fortune-telling, but both Flotuses believed in her powers. So much so that before Florence Harding took office, she promised Champney that if her husband were elected, she would make Champney the official White House astrologer. According to the same research, she suggested to Champney that she would, quote, "bring her in through the front door, not the back," a reference to how Edith Wilson would sneak Champney in through the south entrance so as not to be seen with a spiritualist. Whatever you might believe, it seems that Champney delivered, at least for Florence Harding. Initially, she examined Warren Harding's birth chart the year before Florence Harding would become FLOTUS, discovering that the then Ohio Senator Warren G. Harding would win the presidency, but die a, quote, "sudden, violent, or peculiar death" before the end of his term. Fortunately and unfortunately, both came true. Warren Harding was, of course, elected president, but he did die before his term was over. In fact, Champney predicted Warren Harding's death to the day. On that very disturbing note, let's take a break. Though we now know that astrologers and spiritualists served Flotuses well during the beginning of the great experiment that is American politics, it also became a through line in more contemporary years. Fast forward to the end of Ronald Reagan's presidency, when White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater spoke to the New York Times about Nancy Reagan's love of astrology, though she was openly mocked for her interest in it. Quote, "It's true that Mrs. Reagan has an interest in astrology," Fitzwater admitted. "She has for some time, particularly following the assassination attempt in March of 1981. She was very concerned for her husband's welfare, and astrology has been part of her concern in terms of his activities." While the administration was careful to establish astrology has never influenced policy, we know that this isn't maybe entirely true. It was confirmed that the couple used astrology to determine the best time to announce that Reagan would run for re-election, by way of a woman named Joan Quigley, a Vassar-educated socialite who wrote 2 books on astrology. If not by name, you might know her by reputation. Quigley famously became Reagan's astrologer, paid by the hour, and had a $3,000 a month retainer. The arrangement, quote, "began as a crutch," Nancy wrote in her 1989 memoir. Within a year or two, it had become a habit. Not as out there, perhaps as Nancy Reagan, was when First Lady Hillary Clinton communicated with Eleanor Roosevelt and Mahatma Gandhi during her husband's term. Though a quote-unquote Christian, she drew the line at Jesus, as that would have been, according to Bob Woodward's book, Choice, How Bill Clinton Won, quote, "too personal." Quote, "I occasionally have imaginary conversations with Mrs. Roosevelt to try to figure out what she would do in my shoes," Clinton wrote in a newspaper column. "She usually responds by telling me to buck up, or at least to grow skin as thick as a rhinoceros." In the 1990s, with media much more available to communicate information, rumors abounded about Clinton's conversations, not unlike what actually happened with first ladies like Wilson and Harding, that Clinton was holding seances in the White House, trying to convene with spirits and all kinds of things of that nature. But the rumors were soon squashed, with insider psychologist Jean Houston responding to Woodward's assertions, clarifying that Clinton's chats were simply imaginative exercises to help with Clinton's book project. I'd imagine that every first lady had some kind of strategy for dealing with the demands and pressures of living and working in the White House. But as this episode proves, some are a bit more interesting than others.
Did you know we have completely ad-free early access to all of our episodes? Well, we do. Not only that, but we have dozens of bonus episodes waiting for you. Head on over to patreon.com/ghosttownpod, and you can check it out for 7 days absolutely free. That's patreon.com/ghosttownpod.